Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Amanda Fuller from the Kentucky Academy of Science, and thanks for joining us this evening for an info session about a new student mentoring program that KAS is piloting. And we are talking with some teachers, we're talking with scientists about how better to connect each other and help improve accessibility for student research in K-12. So I would like to start, since we're kind of a small group, I'd like to start and just keep it kind of informal. And if you all don't mind, to go around and introduce who you are, where you're coming from, and maybe what questions you have or what you want to learn tonight, so we can make sure that we do our best to answer everybody's questions. I'm the executive director of the Kentucky Academy of Science. I am talking a lot with Melanie, who I'll ask to introduce herself next. And we are really trying to just use a few of the assets that we have laying around, so to speak, to try to make some connections in these programs. And that's the disclaimer that I will start out by saying. So thanks for being here, Melanie. I will have you go ahead and introduce yourself next.
Amanda. So I'm Melanie. I am the director for the Junior Academy and program coordinator for the KAS meeting. And like Amanda said, we've been talking about this a lot, and we're really excited to have everybody here to talk about some options that we have for students to do research and how we can help with that.
Great, thanks.
And I'm going to tag in Rob next.
Okay, go right ahead. Great.
Hey y'all, I'm Rob Weber. I'm the Kentucky Academy of Sciences Communications and Policy Director. So I try to keep track of the cool things going on and help promote them. So I wanted to tune in tonight so I could start hearing some of the comments and plans about how students are going to be helped by pairing them with scientist mentors, so that I can then take the stories that will unfold in time to come and share them on social media and elsewhere, so that we can continue letting people know what a powerful impact an effort like this can have.
Thank you so much. And yeah, if you do something and nobody knows about it, you might as well not be doing it, right? Okay, so Patrick, you are also an instigator of this initiative. So if you don't mind introduce yourself next, that would be great.
All right. My name is Patrick Goff. I teach 8th grade science at Beaumont Middle, Lexington, Kentucky. I've, excuse me, I'm still trying to get over COVID. Been working, having scientists work with my kids for a number of years, a lot of informal. Last year, I was able to get in contact with Amanda and more so formalize it, if you will, a relationship. And with Kentucky Academy of Science, I have the scientists working with my kids in my classroom with their science fair projects. I know Rob was wanting to hear stories of impact from this. I can tell you from in my classroom, the first year I did it, my daughter was in the group, and she was asynchronously working with a scientist at George Mason University, where she was at the time. And because of her, the partnership there, if you will, the mentorship, my daughter is now in the computer science program at U of L and interning at NASA this fall. So, and I do proud dad moment, sorry, but point back to when she worked with that scientist, because Dr. Oster said, hey, have you thought about coding a simulation to do what you're wanting to do? And she's like, no, I have no idea. So she worked with her on how to learn coding, and that just, I mean, lit a fire. And so that's what she's doing now. So Rob, you want to know what's happening? That's personal story right there.
That's awesome. I think there are a lot of those stories out there, and maybe we just need to do a better job of uncovering them, because every scientist probably has a story of what got them inspired and where they got started.
Yeah.
Cassie, would you mind to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Cassie. Hi, I'm a graduate student at the University of Louisville. I'm also the director of the Science Policy and Outreach Group, the new director. So you guys, I think, worked with us last year on some of more of our policy side initiatives, but we also have a lot of outreach initiatives that and some contacts in the Louisville area that I think would be helpful for this type of program. So we actually do mentoring already with a lot of high schools. And we do science fair mentoring, kind of what you mentioned. You have students come in and talk to your class and mentor with the science fair projects. We do that with Central High School right now. We also worked very closely with the Louisville Regional Science and Engineering Fair. Our director is actually a board member every year. So I'm a board member this year. We have our board meeting actually next week. And so if you have any ideas on how to get students more involved in that, or wanting students to get more involved in that, I can reach out to them and see how they might want to work with you guys as well. And then we just work and we have Louisville Summer Pathways, which is our summer program where we get students to come into the Louisville research community. We try to choose high school students who might not otherwise have that research opportunity. So people who are not from the private schools or the magnet schools. And we try to get them into labs. So we pair them with mentors and they work on a research project throughout the summer. So this just sounded like something that was kind of right up our alley. So, and I'm also very willing to participate personally. So this sounds awesome. Very excited for this initiative.
Awesome. You were one of my fish I was trying to hook, so I'm glad you found us too. And I'm glad you mentioned the Pathways program because that is something that I was wanting to lift up today too. Great. Kelly, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yes, sorry, my video is struggling right now.
No worries.
So I am the laboratory coordinator and also an instructor at Thomas More University. I recently started that position about a year ago. And previously, we've done a lot of outreach with middle school and high school students utilizing our field station. I'm not sure since COVID how much we've been able to do that, but getting students out on the Ohio River, getting them experience with that. We've had a few like STEM camps that ran in the past. We actually had one this summer and run a few different organizations out at our field station. So that's one of our great resources. But I was just interested in being able to see what other resources are available to help bring in middle school and high school students on campus. A couple other departments do some great things here at the university, but just looking to see how we can connect some of those senior faculty as well to those especially high school students who are looking around the area to get them on campus to see all of our other great resources. And not only that, but being able to facilitate those research projects with them. We have undergraduates who do a lot of different projects, but also knowing the need that there is for these projects to take place in high school as well. Like my husband is a high school science teacher and he's always trying to get them involved in different projects. So just seeing what opportunities are available in those different connections and what KAS can offer.
Wow, great. Thank you. Yeah, you just mentioned a few different pieces that have been floating around in my mind. So I'm glad you're here. This is great. Yeah. Well, we had a couple K-12 teachers, other K-12 teachers signed up to join us tonight. And if they are not here, then I think that changes a little bit what our conversation is this evening. Again, we're recording and we can share with folks later. But since we have folks on the science end, I definitely want to hear more about what you all are interested in or what you'd like to see happen. I think let me start with just a little more background about where we're coming from and what our thinking has been so far. And Melanie, chime in here when we can tag team this part. We have been running the Junior Academy, Kentucky Junior Academy program for decades. I think it started in the 1930s. And that program has been bringing students together who come and they present research that they're doing. And it's something of a competition. We send students to the American Junior Academy of Science, which is a national event. We send like a selected number of delegates to that national event from our state, Junior Academy program. That is a parallel program to science fairs. It doesn't have any actual connection to the regional science fairs. At this moment, it hasn't historically. It is a program where students come and they give an oral presentation standing up and show slides instead of a poster like a science fair. So it does have a distinct sort of purpose and experience for students than a science fair experience. But, we think there's a lot of overlap and sort of a pipeline there from students who maybe did a science fair and then have participated in Junior Academy. What we all know is that, fewer and fewer schools are participating in science fairs. And so Melanie, as the director of the Junior Academy, and I have been noticing, even just in the 9 years that we've been coordinating these programs, that it's really been serving a limited number of schools and a limited number of students. So our board has gone back and re-examined, what are we really trying to do here? If we want to grow more scientists in Kentucky, we probably need a more upstream kind of intervention. And maybe what we really should be looking for are opportunities, sort of, Cassie, like what you all are already doing, looking for more opportunities to get students engaged and give students research opportunities who are not finding them somewhere else. So that is sort of the thinking that got us to this point. We're remodeling and revisioning the idea of the Junior Academy program, not just to capture students already doing research, but really to think about how do we introduce more students to the opportunities to do research, and how do we leverage this amazing asset that we have, which is a database of 4,000 members of scientists all across the Commonwealth, basically. Melanie, what do you want to add to that? Any more background?
Well, what else I wanted to just to pile on with that is that we feel really strongly that the Junior Academy can serve the whole state, not just part of the state. And we all know in Louisville, for Cassie, you're in Louisville, Kelly, you're down the road from me, I'm in NKU, that there's students in our areas that are doing lots of science. And how do we get them connected? And how do we get them connected to the scientists who are already coming to the Kentucky Academy of Science meeting? So it's a great opportunity to, even if they're not doing research yet, to go in and say, oh, that is really cool. I want to do what that guy is doing. I want to do what she is doing. I want to study with them. So it creates a pathway, or we want it to create a pathway to, the higher ed and keeping those scientists in Kentucky and getting them connected with all the really cool stuff that's already happening here. And so this fall is the first time we're putting the two organizations together for one meeting. So trying to help facilitate that, putting everybody in the building. There might be conversations, which would be super great. And that's super great. But that's really kind of what we're after is helping to facilitate the students the opportunity to do science and helping them get in touch with mentors and other people who can support them in doing that science, and to support the teachers to help the students to be able to. And that was my little soapbox.
Perfect. Yeah. And yeah, you're right that teachers are definitely an important linkage here. And we are working hard to try to figure out, like, how do we meet teachers where they are? How do we bring them resources that are meaningful and not put more work onto their plate somehow, because nobody wants to do that. Great. So another disclaimer I would just say at the top here is that we don't have any additional funding. We don't have any additional staffing for this program right now. We are trying to do this on a shoestring and use the assets that we have, and just sort of put some things together. So we're not looking to commit ourselves to too much here at the beginning, but to just be flexible and be responsive and use our resources that we have. So Patrick, I would like you to explain, if you don't mind, with all those disclaimers about science fairs. I would like you to just share one example of kind of what inspired this or helped us realize that more of this could be possible. The program that you piloted last year, I thought was a good example and a good successful one. And it really made us think that this kind of relationship could be possible, even if it wasn't in the context of a science fair. So if you don't mind to share what you're doing, I think that would be really cool.
Okay. Well, I think I would say with that first story about my daughter, I mean, this whole idea started 7 years ago or something like that. And I just thought it would be a really great idea to get my kids working with practicing scientists on their projects. I wasn't worried about trying to match student projects to specific domains or research fields or whatever. Okay. What I wanted my kids to be matched up with was practicing scientists who they could talk to about just the nature of science. Are they doing science, quote unquote? I don't even want to say the right way, but are you approaching the process in a logical manner? You know, and I just thought it would be good for them to hear from people who are doing this on a daily basis, not just me. Because I mean, I think we all know whether it's you talking to your own kid or you're talking to somebody in your own, if they hear me every day talking about it, but then somebody outside goes, oh, hey, you know, this is how we do science. They go, oh, okay, that makes sense. Thanks. But there's a bunch of things it does. I like the fact that it gives my kids a chance to talk to a practicing scientist. I think it goes a little bit to what Cassie had mentioned. It gives some of my kids who may not have the opportunity a chance to talk with a practicing scientist. I like getting the diversity of practicing scientists, you know, men, women, different races, all that stuff. I mean, I think that's fantastic. This is a quick side note. I do a lot of Skyping with scientists in my classroom. I remember one time I had there's a female African American scientist. She was talking to my kids, and one of my kids goes, "I didn't know somebody like me could do science." I'm like, "What do you mean?" And she tells me, I'm like, "Okay, I feel awful now, but I'm glad you saw it. Yes, you can do it." And so the conversations, they start very formal, but then by the end of the semester, they're becoming very informal. And they're talking about science, but they're also, the kids in science, I think, are talking back and forth about, how did you get to where you are? What do you do? What's your job like? That sounds interesting. Because I've always been of the mindset, yeah, teaching the content's important, but I want my kids excited about science. So if they're excited about science, then they're going to want to stay with it. And then they want to learn more about it. And usually the more you start learning about science, the cooler it gets, because the crazier science gets. You know, and you start seeing all the crazy stuff that's going on out there, and you're like, that's awesome. And you know, I want to have my kids in middle school, they're still young enough that we can hook them to where they're going to love science, and then they can go to high school. And then I always push my kids to just take as much science as you can. Don't worry about the specific field. Just take as much science as you can. College, you can start specializing, but in high school, just take as much as you can. But what we ended up doing, I don't know how much you went into detail, Amanda, but
do you want to just say something general about the structure of how you were interacting?
Yeah. I matched up. It was like one scientist would have 5 or 6 projects. And then the kids would email with the scientist. I want to say it was once a week. They had to give a quick update. Yeah, hey, this is what I'm thinking about, or you know, I've had this setback, or honestly, hey, we didn't do anything this week. You know, it was a busy week, and everybody has that week, right? But I thought one of the fun things was teaching the kids how to write an email, because they don't know how to write emails. But so then the conversation would go back and forth, but I always they had to include me on the email. So there were 3 of us on every email, me, the scientist, and the kid. That way everybody's protected or covered, if you will. And I told the scientist under no term, in certain terms, don't respond to the kid if they just emailed you one-on-one. Put me back on it and say, hey, you have to have him on it. So, and I wasn't worried about, something happening, but just, sorry, that's the Boy Scout in me. I like to have that coverage, and I thought it worked well. And the kids understood that, hey, there's 2 adults on this email. So if anything, you do anything wonky, look, we got a copy of it. We're going to show your parents. But in school was good. Everybody just covered everybody. But they would asynchronously go back and forth. Couple of times, I don't know if I did it last year, but previously, we set up a one-on-one Zoom or Skype where they could talk face-to-face online with their scientists. They had questions about the project or whatever. But it worked. I think it works well. And I know Amanda said I'm trying not to add to the teacher's plate. I'll be quite honest, it took stuff off of my plate. Because instead of me having to put eyeballs every week on all 70 projects, I can look at the ones that might need more attention one-on-one. Of course, I'm skimming everything, but I can really hone in on the ones who need the extra help then. And I've got extra adults then looking at all the projects who are kind of like weeding out some of the stuff and just helping with the guides. That helps me out as a science teacher, I'll be honest. So I'm all about this and whatever I can do. And I know I've got a couple of friends who couldn't be here tonight. They want to get involved. So, and I think if we can start small, a few teachers, and start going, hey, look, this does work.
Can I ask a question just based on what you just described? So you do entirely virtual, so you didn't do any in person? Okay. Is that just because of COVID, or is that just
a combination of COVID and, to be quite honest, the virtual? It was easier to match up people because this might sound dumb or weird or whatever, but I'll just say it. It was easier for me to get somebody to volunteer to work with my kids that lived in Australia who could email, as opposed to get somebody who lives in Lexington to drive down the street and take the extra hour drive time on both ends, come work with the kids. And I get that, and I understand, but that's the asynchronous part through email really helps because they could do it whenever they wanted. And the response is, I didn't try and make it synchronous. The asynchronous worked a lot better for that.
And how many of those, like those Zoom meetings with the students, how often was that happening? Not every week?
No, not every week.
Okay.
I would say we didn't do it last year, I don't think. But previously, maybe 3 or 4 a semester.
Okay.
And we only did it in the fall semester, but 3 or 4 across that semester. They would be able to sync up a time and want to talk about their project. And just as I know this is anecdotal or whatever, but the level of the projects have gotten better since I've been matching up like this. So.
So as compare and contrast, Cassie, do you want to mention a little bit, like now describe how your program is structured?
Yeah. We have
there's a lot of
couple different
here.
programs. Yeah. So the first one, the science fair mentoring, which is very similar to what you described. For COVID, we did do virtual mentoring. We did Zoom meetings though, and we did them almost exclusively like 3 to 4 times a semester, kind of similar to what we said. And we go through the spring because we're prepping them for LRSEF, which is the Louisville Regional Science and Engineering Fair. We did not do the emails, and I actually really like that because I think that keeps the students kind of on topic, because it's one of the issues that we had was when we come back, a lot of times the students they either haven't made a ton of progress, or we've forgotten their project. They've kind of forgotten, because the students we work with are high school students and they're in AP Bio. So they're already busy with everything else. So also definitely starting younger is great. The middle school is awesome. And then what we do for that mentoring is typically actually, and then once COVID kind of calmed down last spring, we did go in person. And that worked out really well. We did have to take like a class period to do it. So the teacher would schedule like 2 to 3 class periods per semester, and we would go in person, work with the students for about an hour. And that I feel like they were more responsive to that than Zoom meetings, because even the Zoom breakout rooms, a lot of the high school students are just sort of like, why am I here? Whereas if you're in person, you can actually get them engaged and involved. And they would rotate at tables to different mentors so that they would get different perspectives on their project rather than, and the thing I do like about yours is the longitudinal mentoring. So a lot of ours, even though we had longitudinal mentors there, again, since we weren't getting updates and since it was kind of hard to remember the projects and pair them with the exact people that they were with the previous time. So and then separately, the other thing that we do with mentoring is the LSP project. So Louisville Summer Pathways is totally different. Do you want me to talk about that as well? Or
Yes, I'm glad you made that distinction. There's two different things. There's the science fair mentoring, which is not as much longitudinal.
Yeah, Louisville, and then Louisville Summer Pathways, which is very longitudinal, and it's very so it's actually so the true description for it is a paid research internship with the university, but it's paid through SummerWorks, which I don't know if you guys have heard of, but that's a Louisville program that they kind of get high school students started with their first job. So SummerWorks provides funding for our students. They log their hours like a job. So they're learning both job skills as well as science. And what we really like about that is that they get paired with typically graduate student mentors, but it can also be directly with the PIs. They apply, they'll rank their list of whose lab they want to work in, and then they typically get a true project. And at the end of the program, which it's a, depending on the year, it's a 6 to 8 week program, also depending on how much funding we have. So, and then at the very end of the program, they give a presentation, and it's kind of like what you mentioned, where it's a oral presentation, and we give them a structure for it. So it's geared towards like what they learned that semester, as well as just generally their project. We're going to start encouraging them to present it other places, because I think that's something we haven't been doing. I wrote down to email Dana, who's our current LSP director, to email all the previous students that they can present their projects at KAS this year. But they come into the program entirely. Most of them have never been in a lab before. They've never done anything in a lab. And then they come out, it's what they make out of it. We've had a couple students who are actually going to be on papers with the PIs because they've done so much work over the summer and for that 6-week program, which is insane. My student last year she was super interested. She just knew she was interested in genetics. And so she saw my project and she got super involved with learning about like what RNA sequencing is, how to read all of the RNA sequencing data. It's much, much higher level than I would expect out of any high school student. And they all do absolutely wonderfully. And we really do, when we recruit for it and review the applications, we have a demographic section. And so we try to recruit both underrepresented minorities as well as based on financial situation. So if they have a lower financial situation, we try to rank those applications higher. And then we have a system where we go through and we don't fully exclude based on either of those. So it's not like entirely an initiative for just that. We also have some students who come from like, for example, DuPont Manual, which is a very big magnet school here. So it ends up being a pretty good mix. But we have demographic information if you guys are ever interested in that. Yeah, and so that's a huge summer program that we put on, and we don't have a ton of budget either. That's also something that we kind of dealt with. So most of the people who fund it, actually SPOG itself has no internal budget. It's all funded through grants. We're entirely nonprofit and funded through just partnerships. So the partnership with SummerWorks is the big one to pay for everything under. And then we have one of the departments in the University of Louisville. It's called IPIBS, which is just the Integrated Biomedical Sciences. They work with us to help fund some of the meals for students and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a great program. And if you're more interested in learning about that, I can put you directly in contact with our current LSP director, Dana. She did it last. So our LSP directors alternate every 2 years. So it's like there's 2 of them and they kind of stagger. So that way somebody's always knows what's going on. That's how we've kept it entirely student run. And so it's never like there's no one there. You always have somebody, even if they can't find somebody else for a little bit. But she's great. So, but yeah, those are our 2 major outreach programs. We also do a couple of speaker series with the high schools in the area. So Wagner High School is one of them that we did a speaker series with. So we went to some of the biology classes, particularly during COVID, and gave virtual speaking series. But yeah, we love anything mentorship. That's like our gig. So just let us know what you need from us, and I can probably find a couple grad students to sneak in.
That's great. And are your members mostly in biological sciences, or is it sort of a range?
It's a range, but I will say that in the past few years, COVID decreased our membership a ton, which because it was really difficult to recruit.
Mhm.
We actually just started recruiting undergrads for that reason because we need more volunteers, and we have a couple of undergrads right now. We're primarily in that IPIBS department, which is actually the entirety of all the medical school departments. So anything that's we don't have. So I'm an MD PhD student, but we don't have a lot of medical school members. It's actually a PhD. It was originally just graduate students.
Mhm.
So IPIBS is like microbiology, immunology, the neuroscience department, the anatomical science department. So it is very bio heavy. We do have like our policy director. If you've met Jacob Miller, he's great. We love him. He's actually chemical engineering. So we have a big mix. So it's a mix in terms of like our exec, but our current membership leans very heavily towards IPIBS because that is where a lot of the exec is from. So that's where we've recruited from our specific departments. But we are trying to branch out, especially to main campus. But right now we're mostly medical campus.
Okay. Great.
One last
So
thing.
do you end up,
The other thing you mentioned. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was just wondering, do you get a lot of students? Do you get more students applying for those summer internships? Do you call them internships? Do you get
Yes.
more of those applying than you have positions?
Yes, and that's actually in our actual limitation, as I'm sure you've probably realized with the mentoring, is actually the scientists who are willing to take on a summer student. So it's very, very taxing to have a summer student in your lab for the summer because we don't provide the labs any money because we can't. That's not a part of our budget. So anything that the students are using, the lab has to provide. The students themselves have to have a mentor, and you have to be with them all the time. They do 20 hours. So they actually do 20 hours a week worth. They don't do a full, they can, if they want, they can do up to 30 to be paid, or if the lab will let them stay longer, they can stay longer. But 20 hours a week on a grad student is a lot to work with directly with the student, because you kind of have to put your project to the side and you have to have a project for the student. So it's it does end up being pretty taxing finding mentors. I heard you. That's sorry. That's been like our biggest that's been our drawback. We actually, unfortunately, had more funded positions available than mentors we could find last year, which was 20. We had 22 funded positions and we only got 20 mentors. So we usually have, and then we had a ton of applications, which was great. They did a wonderful job recruiting from the high schools for the students. But if there were other programs that we could mention to those students, we used to have. I'm sorry, I'm just rambling, but we used to have the Brown Cancer Center program. And so that actually was a summer program that we could direct students to as well, because it was another research program. But that is no longer happening, or at least it didn't happen last year. They might re-up it. And I think they are now doing a diversity-driven research summer program as well. So we might direct some students to that if they don't, if we don't have enough spots to cater the students. But if you guys have any other opportunities or ideas, that's also something we're definitely looking for. Sorry.
That's great. Anybody else have questions for Cassie about those programs? I'm hearing a lot of good connections here.
I have, if you don't care, I have a couple of like general potential suggestions, like / questions that I wrote down as Patrick was going over stuff. So
Please,
if you guys,
yes.
so I know LRSEF, one of the things we're doing next week to recruit teachers to do more of what Patrick is doing and get their students involved in the science fair as a part of their curriculum is a PD day for the teachers. So we're offering like professional development hours to come and learn about like LRSEF and how to get their students involved. Have you guys thought of, you mentioned like trying to like take off the tax of teachers. I don't know how hard it is to get to be able to become a like PD hour, but have you ever thought about doing something like that in order to reach out to more teachers if that's something that you've been having issues with?
We have never done anything internally where we've been able to offer PD hours for teachers. I'm actually trying to learn how we do get set up to do that because we've never done it. And I have questions out right now to like 3 or 4 people wanting to find out like, how do we set that up if we want to do that?
Okay.
It's a lot easier than you think.
Okay.
Honestly, if you had a session and you gave certificates and signed your name at the bottom, essentially, the school is going to accept it as professional development.
Okay,
It's not that hard.
okay, so there's nothing that I have to register or paperwork to fill out or
No.
anything like that.
No,
I
not
know
really.
I know at least for ours, we had to reach out to the Jefferson County School District. And so we had to reach out to that just generally to make sure that they would accept it. But again, it was very similar to what you said, where it's just going to be assigning a name on a paper. And they were like, and then they even mentioned for other schools that we would reach out directly to the principals if a teacher came and they wanted, so that we were like, yes, we will make sure that this will work for you.
Okay,
So I don't know if you have if you wanted to target specific areas, you could reach out to the general school districts because most of them have overarching, and then specific ones like the independent schools within it.
Yeah,
Okay.
Jefferson County has its own way of doing things. In Fayette County, we're almost right there with them. But honestly, if you wanted to know, I mean, it's not that hard. I mean, we go to all kinds of stuff, and people sign off, and basically we take your stuff to get back to school, and they go, okay.
great.
I think some of it goes back to I think what Cassie almost said, the principal themselves. What are they willing to accept or not?
Okay. Great.
But if there's districts we wanted to specifically target, like you were saying, we could email their superintendents and ask them. Like
Great.
right now, I'd probably lay money that if you emailed anybody in Eastern Kentucky and said, hey, can they get PDs? They're gonna say, sure, love it.
Right. Right.
And so.
Yeah, I mean, I had actually posed, if we do info sessions like this for teachers and they are just learning about the resources and the opportunities, like that to me is professional development, that we could offer an hour for a program like this.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And so, yeah, telling teachers about science fair opportunities is definitely an interesting idea, and let us know how that goes because we keep hearing how hard it is for teachers to do science fairs and how that's been decreasing.
Yeah, I think the whole point, and they're bringing us in as well. So they have a couple of the SPOG exec who are coming to just also be like, here's like what LRSCF, like things that you can do in your lab. And then here are people who can help you so that if you like, it does take some of the work off. So that way it's not just telling them like, you have to do all of this on your own. It's like, here, if you want mentors, like this group can provide mentors, and this group can provide, like, if you want people to come in and speak about like how to, like, even if you want us to like guide your students through almost the entire way, like we're fine with doing that. So I think maybe just, and that's, I have no idea how successful it's going to be. So I will keep you updated.
Okay, great.
hoping really successful, but
thank you. Yeah.
no idea.
But I think the point is well taken, that sometimes an endpoint is helpful when you're implementing something in the classroom, and whether that's a science fair or whether it's a junior academy presentation or something else. One of our board members, Justin McFadden, made this point to me. He's also served on the board of the Science Teachers Association, and says, sometimes teachers need that, or students need that goal to work toward. And so sometimes that's a helpful endpoint, but it doesn't have to be necessarily. And so, Kelly, I wanted to ask you, since you're at a field station, the field station piece, I think, is a really potentially really interesting one, because sometimes teachers don't have, or they don't feel like they have resources or opportunities in their own classrooms, but we have this great network of field stations in Kentucky, and I think there are opportunities there for students to get involved, or for mentors, to offer some of those resources that are at the field stations. And I wondered if you wanted to share a little bit more about how you all are doing that, or ideas that you have about how other field stations might be able to offer resources to students interested in doing research or training teachers or anything like that.
Yeah, so out at the field station, a lot of what is done is primarily takes place during the summer. And so our director of the field station, Chris Lawrence, he is the expert as far as all the outreach components and what we do out there. I know that we've done a lot more in the past. I'm not so sure about the past few years, but a lot of things take place during the summer. quite often we have opportunities for students to come to the field station, not only to partake in just daily classes, tours and things like that, but there is opportunities to be able to have those experiential moments. Over the summer, we primarily have housing available to like summer interns who are undergraduates. So that's the main component as far as their research over the summer goes. For high school students, I don't know exactly how there might be possibilities to have like maybe one or two students stay out at the field station because we have the ability to do that. But there's a lot of connections through the field stations too, not only just the resources we have there, but we partner with a bunch of other organizations within the area who have expert scientists who can provide input to those students. I liked when everybody was talking about just having those virtual conversations, exchanging via email. And those individuals would be able to have those conversations with students, I think. But there is a good chunk of resources available. I am not entirely certain of everything available because I'm mainly on campus. So I'm familiar with a lot of the campus resources. Our field station's about 20 minutes outside of our campus, right along the river, and we're just, I believe, like northwest of that. But if you're interested in gaining more information, Chris Lawrence, he does a lot of that middle school and high school programming, as well as Tess Mulry. She's the STEM outreach coordinator, and she does a lot of events and programming with high school and middle school students. So she would be really familiar as far as the resources available out there.
And tell me again that person's title or her name.
Yeah, Tess Mulry, and she's always looking to be involved and active with the community, especially students. But she readily engages a lot with middle school and high school groups coming out to the station, giving tours, and allowing classroom activities to take place. We have tons of specimens too, so there's always opportunities there, and different areas to go around and sample around the station. So yeah, Tess Mulry.
Oh, that's great. And so
Yeah.
So you have some pieces there. It doesn't sound like you have kind of like longitudinal research mentoring, but maybe that's something that would intersect with some of the other things you will have going on.
Yeah. Nothing longitudinal that I'm aware of at the moment, but
Okay.
like I said, they're more the experts at the field station.
Yeah, but there's certainly there's physical space there where somebody could do a research project, and some facilities there where you could, sample the water.
Yeah.
Look under microscopes, things like that.
Yes. Yeah. We just have an entire classroom that was redesigned a couple of years ago. That's what we primarily use when we bring in school groups. But there's spaces along the walls. We actually put up like tanks for a couple studies over the summer for undergrads. But there's space to do some things there. And they're always willing to maximize that space to be able to provide opportunities to students as best as we can. I think that's kind of the theme of Thomas More, is maximizing our space to provide the best experiences for students, as I'm sure most places are very familiar with.
Yeah, that's great. I just think, and we've also had a couple conversations with the Ecological Research and Something Center in Lexington. It's basically an urban field station in Lexington. And cool. They have some programs, maybe sort of like your field station. They have some programs with some structure where K-12 students can be there for their set programs on Saturdays. But I'm also interested in envisioning that as potentially a research space for people who have a research question and they need a facility where they can investigate that research question, or need a lab space to do some analysis of something, or something like that. So I think field stations who have that staffing at least, there would be some ability there to host, to accommodate researchers. And I'm glad we have this amazing network of field stations. It's like a great resource that I think we can continue to develop for teachers.
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah. A couple other things that came up last week in conversation. After school clubs came up as a question, as a way that potentially, like if you're not doing research in a classroom setting, that after school clubs could potentially be a way for students to get engaged in a research project. And also the opportunities related to citizen science projects. A lot of those are things that are kind of already structured and can be plug and play for students who really don't know where to start, or for teachers who don't know where to start, or mentors who don't know where to start. Sometimes the citizen science projects could offer that initial structure, or give you sort of a place to start. I wonder if any of you have had any experience with clubs or with citizen science enterprises.
What is citizen science?
These would be, do either of you, Kelly or Patrick, do you either want to take a stab at explaining that maybe better than I could?
Citizen science, or I've heard a lot of people now referring to it as community-based science, trying to get the stigma of citizen off of it. But it's more like, I don't know if you were like Project Redbud, or it's where people go out and you basically take pictures of when your redbud tree blooms, and they plug in it, and like I would go out and take a picture of my redbud when it blooms and dump it into this like large national database, and they're tracking when the red buds are blooming up and down across the US. So you can long-term study how are the red buds blooming. Are they blooming earlier or later? You know, and there's a bunch of projects out there like that. There's a Monarch one, a Monarch Butterfly one. There's Project Redbud. There's a water quality one that's out there. So there's all kinds of stuff, and it's basically plug and play. It really isn't that hard to do.
It tells you how to collect the data and how to upload. A lot of them are ecological in nature, and they're things you can do outside. They're, you know, meteorological data or ecological data and recording observations of things. Microplastics in waterways was one that we did a few years ago as a workshop with high school kids. So some of those are ones that, again, if you don't have an independent research question, they're still fulfilling the inquiry. You know, they're still like an inquiry based thing you could use in a classroom. And sometimes there are data sets that you can also get that you can download from those projects as well. So in the last few minutes, Melanie, do you want to do a little bit more explaining about the Junior Academy 2.0 and talk about maybe how the mentoring piece might fit into the Junior Academy in its future iteration?
Yes, and I'm going to leave my camera off, try to save a little bandwidth there. But this new version of the Junior Academy, it's really geared towards bringing the Junior Academy participants, those middle school and high school students, together with the professionals, the undergrads, the graduate students, the people who are doing science, and helping to just kind of bridge those gaps between the two, giving them a space to be able to start to think about those questions. You know, what about science are they interested in? What gets them excited? What do they think they want to study? And giving them a place where they are not separated. I mean, they're going to, at this meeting we're talking about for the fall, they're going to be doing some things with just the Junior Academy. So they're going to get to know those other middle school and high school students across the state, or from many parts of the state at least. But they're going to do a lot of things just like the rest of us. They're going to go to some oral presentation sessions. Some of them are going to be making presentations. So when you guys were talking about the summer pathways and the summer work that's being done, those are great opportunities for those students to come in and to start presenting their work. And one of the things that we've been very purposeful about is first of all, they're going to get a ranking. They're not going to get a first, second, third, or 27th place. We're going to rank them, and I thought I had that paper in front of me. I do not, but it doesn't matter if this is a project that they have completed or if it's a project that they are still in the planning stages. Because we all know sometimes in those planning stages, you're going, this is amazing. And then you run it past somebody, they're like, what were you thinking? Did you think about doing this other thing? And this part is really cool, but what about this? Right. So it's a good opportunity to start getting that feedback so that they can take that project and they can continue on with it. We've also, we want to encourage students who are doing science fair. I mean, even though we know that science fair it's a little on the struggle bus right now. The numbers are pretty low. I mean, it's still happening, but I think we can all work together in some way to revive that in some format, as well as to build our program. But, taking those kind of projects, which it's a poster project, and taking it to that next step of, okay, what can I do next? Because most of them somewhere on their poster or somewhere in their presentation, they're saying, if I could do this over, or if I could continue with this is what I would do. Well, this is what you would do, right? You take that, maybe you do a little more work on it. You do put a little more time in observing whatever it is that you're observing to bring it up to giving a presentation. We do have posters at our meeting. So, we're not saying we don't do that also, but it's a great place. It's a great space to bring those students in, to be able to, to continue working on those things and start to make those connections. Because, when they're in high school, especially, I don't know if I want to say especially, but I'm going to, especially the science students, they're starting to think, well, where am I going to go to college? And we all know a lot of those are, well, my friend is going to go here, so that's where I'm going to go. Well, do they have the program you want? I don't know, but my friend is going there. And there's some value in that. But there's also value in meeting the scientists that are already there and say, oh, I don't know you, but this works is really cool, and I want to be a part of it. So that's, let's keep that going, keep that discussion going as I'm making those decisions.
I think keeping kids in Kentucky too is sort of like a quiet goal that we have. If we can start making relationships with them as high school students, like before they get to college, we'd love for them to stay here and, even build on those relationships with research mentors. The other thing that I don't know if Melanie even emphasized this, but like what we're changing about the program this year is that you can come and participate even if you are not doing research. So for those students, Cassie, that you're involved with, we would love for them to come and present their research, but we also want to welcome students in to this event and welcome teachers into the event who are not necessarily engaged in research right now, but maybe just want to look around and see what the opportunities would be, meet some scientists, see what it looks like, and then dip in for next year. We're not expecting in November that hundreds and hundreds of students show up with research presentations to share, but if you can come and see what that experience is like, we're hoping maybe to set some frameworks so that teachers can engage, so that scientists can engage.
Right. And just to pile on a little bit with that part as well, one of the things that's really great about our meeting is that people are generally very encouraging. So if a student for some reason goes completely off the rails and their presentation or the poster is it's wrong, no one's going to say, oh my gosh, that's so wrong. It's going to be more along the line, well, what else have you thought about? Have you tried, to help build them up and get them back on track, give them some new directions, give them some positive feedback so that they're not discouraged and that they'll continue on with that or move on to some other project. But it's generally a very positive atmosphere, which is one of the things I really appreciate about the folks that come to our meetings.
Thank you. Yeah. So we are at 8 o'clock. Patrick, thank you for this lead, and I will follow up with you about getting in touch with them. I'm glad to know about anybody and everybody who's already got research going that we could invite to November and get them connected if they're
That's,
not already.
That program is one of my daughter went through, and it's a 360-hour research project those kids do between their junior and senior year. And if you really are going to be presenting in November, that would be a good prelim presentation for them to do before they go into the district and regionals.
Thank you. Wonderful. Great. Well, any other final questions or observations before we wrap this up? And I do want to follow up with all of you after this.
Yeah, minor things real quick was I will push the LR, like if you guys do want to get into a partnership with LRSEF, because I think that they would absolutely love to have they're looking for more ways to reach students across Kentucky as well. So that's another, and I know a lot of students in our area at least who do participate in LRSEF do longitudinal projects and come back multiple years doing the same project over and over again. So more feedback on that's great. Another thing you mentioned was the after school project programs. So do you guys do more engineering projects too? Because if you're willing to have less testable hypotheses, or even if it was testable hypotheses, I was really involved in Science Olympiad growing up, and I know that they have a lot of building events, as we call them, where they build a lot of things. So the testing events, obviously students don't have a project to present, but if you're looking for students that already have a project and they might be looking for somewhere to present it, if I would have known about this growing up, that would have been awesome. And I'm from Eastern Kentucky, by the way. So yeah, anything, and I know a lot of them we don't do science fairs there, but we do at least my school did Science Olympiad and academic team. So if you could get some of those students who might be wanting to have those opportunities, but don't necessarily, that's another option. I love the fact that you're doing it in Moorhead too. So yeah.
That's cool. A great idea. Yeah, we hadn't really thought about that, but I am aware that there are Science Olympiad teams, and that would be an interesting place for us to make connections. So I'm glad you mentioned that. We might look into who we could get in touch with, how we could coordinate those communications. Yeah, we move our meeting around every year, so it's in Moorhead this year, and we're basically on a 9-year rotation, so everybody gets to host KAS. Who's big enough to host.
One last question: do you guys have any like grants for students who like travel grants? So I know a lot of the students for LSP can't, their parents likely will not be able to afford to, especially with gas prices right now, to drive to Moorhead. So is that something that you guys have done in the past or thought about doing this year?
We have thought about all kinds of things. We've thought about small research grants to facilitate projects for students to actually do research. Haven't thought about so much specifically defraying the costs to get to Moorhead. That's a tricky one. I'm in touch with a couple of donors right now, but between now and November, I'm not sure I would promise that be available to anybody. If there are people who are looking for like carpools or something, like we could maybe like offline coordinate a little bit if students are looking for help with that.
Okay. I know our students are not allowed to drive, any high school students. I know that's like a university policy. So.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But I don't know if.
Okay. Well, if there's students who want to go, let's be in touch and let's see what we can do to help make that happen.
Okay. I'll look more into how many students we might have who would actually want to participate, and then we can think about it.
It is a ways, right? And then staying overnight, because the thing is 2 or 3 days, so it's not insignificant. We do recognize that is an obstacle for folks. Yeah, the Center for STEM Excellence has funding, and they're doing hosting the program and letting students register for free. But yeah, the travel and potentially accommodations overnight is a real thing to think about. It used to be just one day. It still could be one day. I mean, they still could just come one day and go home. Is an option too. But yeah, we're again in restructuring this. We're trying to learn what's helpful and learn from this first year and see how this is going to go into the future. All right. Well, thank you so much, all of you, for joining. This has been a great conversation. It's really encouraging me that we are on the right track and that we have a lot of good pieces here that we can bring together. I'm excited for all of your enthusiasm to help facilitate this, and excited to know more about what you're already doing. So I will follow up.
Will you reach out? Is it okay if we share emails that for everyone that's in the email, or everyone that's meeting? Perfect.
Yes, I will make a note to do that, if that's okay with you all. All right, so watch for messages from me. I'll be putting a call out to sign up mentors some more. And so if you would forward those around your networks, that would be great. And we'll also connect with a couple teachers, hopefully who Patrick can encourage to try a little project with us this year too.
Yeah, I've got a couple friends that want to take advantage of it. So
Great. All right. Well, thank you all so much. Have a good night, and we'll be back in touch with you.
thanks. Nice to see everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.